I stepped out of the car, my breath fogging in the cold night air. The massive stone walls of Eastern State Penitentiary loomed over me like a sleeping giant, the moon casting pale light over its jagged towers. I shut the car door softly, the sound unnaturally loud in the empty street. Pulling my jacket tight, I walked toward the front gate, boots crunching on loose gravel. The iron gate groaned when I pushed it open, echoing off the surrounding walls like a warning. I paused for a moment, staring into the dark courtyard beyond. Even after months on the job, coming here at night always felt wrong, as if the prison didn't want me there. The place felt alive, waiting, watching. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting a narrow path through the darkness. Weeds poked through cracks in the pavement, swaying gently in the wind. Just another night, I whispered to myself, though my voice sounded small. My radio hissed suddenly, static breaking the silence and making me jump. I raised it to my mouth. Control. This is Unit 4. I'm on site. Only silence answered me. I frowned, then turned toward the guard station. That's when I heard a faint metallic scream, like something dragging against stone, coming from somewhere near the outer wall. I spun, sweeping the flashlight across the courtyard. Nothing moved. Heart thudding a little faster, I shook my head, unlocked the guard station door, and stepped inside. The guard station smelled of dust and cold metal. I set my flashlight on the desk, its beam cutting across faded logbooks and a coffee mug left behind by the day shift. I flipped the switch for the overhead lights. Nothing. Great, I muttered, picking up the flashlight again. As I scanned the room, I noticed the security monitors flickering. The ancient black and white screen struggled to display the live feed, distorting the images into grainy ghosts. One camera showed the central corridor. A figure stood there. I froze. The figure was motionless, facing away from the camera, barely more than a shadow. I blinked, leaned closer. The screen fuzzed with static and the figure was gone. I swallowed hard, grabbed the radio again. Control, is there supposed to be anyone else here tonight? Static. I sighed and clipped the radio back on my belt. The job was simple. Do the rounds, check the logs, log everything. I could handle that. I stepped back out into the courtyard. The air felt colder now. As I crossed toward the first cell block, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned no one. Then, beam of my flashlight landed on the gravel path I had just walked. There were wet footprints that hadn't been there before. My throat went dry. The footprints glistened as though freshly made, trailing off towards cell block 7. I followed them, each step feeling heavier than the last. The door to the block stood open, the darkness inside like a mouth waiting to swallow me. I clicked the beam of the flashlight into the glowing rows of cells stretched away into blackness. The air smelled of rust and something faintly sour, like old sweat and mildew. I stepped inside. The sound of the door creaking shut behind me made me jump. My boots echoed on the cracked concrete as I walked past the first row of cells. Each one was empty rusted bunks, broken toilets, graffiti scrawled and flaking paint. A soft whisper floated through the air. I froze, shining the light around. The whisper came again, closer this time, like someone breathing just behind me. I spun, no one there. My radio crackled to life. A voice hissed, so soft it barely sounded human. I staggered backward, heart hammering. The radio went dead, then every cell door slammed shut at once, the sound deafening. I dropped to my knees and covered my ears as the metallic crash echoed through the block. Then silence. My flashlight flickered and went out. My breath came in quick gasps as I slapped the light back on. When it flared to life again, someone was standing at the far end of the corridor. A man, thin, head bald, wearing what looked like an old prison uniform. Hello, I called, my voice shaking. The man slowly raised his head. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. Then he turned and walked through the solid iron bars as though they weren't there. My scream caught in my throat. The air turned icy. Frost crept across the cell doors. I spun and ran, bolting out of the block and back into the courtyard. My radio hissed again. Still here, the voice whispered. My hand shook as I gripped the flashlight, backing away from cell block 7. The courtyard was too quiet now. No wind, no distant traffic, nothing. I forced myself to keep moving. The next stop was the administration wing. I could log the incident later. As I crossed the cracked pavement, something clattered behind me. I turned sharply. A pair of shackles lay in the dirt. They hadn't been there before. The iron cuffs trembled as though someone had just dropped them. My mouth went dry. I bent down, my beam fixed my ears as I moved deeper into the admin wing. My flashlight beam bounced across the hallway, catching faded photos of prison staff on the wall. Their faces seemed to watch me. As I passed, I tried the first office door locked. The second one swung open on rusted hinges. I stepped inside. The desk sat in the center of the room, the drawers half open. Papers scattered across the floor like someone had searched through them in a hurry. The sound of chains dragged past the door. I pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath. Something stopped. Outside the room, my flashlight flickered. I slowly turned it toward the doorway. A shadow stretched across the threshold, long, distorted, like someone impossibly tall was standing just beyond view. The chains rattled once, then fell silent. I waited, every muscle screaming to run. Then the shadow moved, sliding across the floor toward me. I bolted, sprinting out of the office and down the hall. I ran until I reached a staircase leading down. I hesitated only a second before plunging into the darkness, boots clanging on metal steps. The air grew colder as I descended, the smell of mildew and rust stronger. At the bottom, I found myself in a long hallway lined with storage rooms. My flashlight revealed broken furniture, stacks of rotting paperwork, and rusted bars blocking certain doors. Behind me, something followed the faint scrape of chains dragging against concrete. I moved quickly, my breath fogging in front of me. I tried a door near the end of the hall. To my surprise, it opened easily. Inside was a narrow corridor, brick walls damp with condensation. It didn't appear on any map I'd seen. I stepped inside. The door swung shut behind me with a hollow clang. For a moment, I thought I heard whispers, dozens of them coming from somewhere ahead. I forced myself forward, deeper into the darkness. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, urgent. My flashlight flickered, threatening to go out. I quickened my pace until the corridor opened into a low-ceiling chamber. In the center stood an old wooden chair bolted to the floor, leather straps dangling from its arms. My stomach turned. This wasn't just a storage room. It looked like some kind of isolation chamber, or worse. As I approached, the whispers stopped. The silence pressed on my ears. Then a single voice spoke, deep and resonant, though there was no one in the room. "You shouldn't have come here." I spun, beam sweeping the corners. Nothing. Then the door behind her slammed shut. I ran to it, pulling with all my strength, but it wouldn't budge. A low groan echoed from the chair. Leather straps lifted on their own, as though invisible hands were preparing it for her. I stumbled back from the chair, my heart slamming against my ribs. The straps ripped like snakes, curling and uncurling, waiting for me to sit. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. A loud clang rang out from the wall to my left. Brick shifted, revealing a narrow crawl space. My flashlight flickered, but I aimed it into the opening. The breeze blew from the passage, cold and damp, carrying with it the faint sound of sobbing. I crouched low, squeezing into the space. The air was so tight I had to drag myself forward on elbows and knees. My flashlight beam bounced wildly over the rough brick, throwing my shadow ahead of me like a taunt. Behind her, the chair creaked. I froze, staring back over my shoulder. The straps were gone. Instead, a figure now sat in the chair, its head slowly turning toward me, though it had no face. I screamed and crawled faster, tearing my jacket on the bricks. The sobbing ahead turned to laughter. I crawled until the tunnel sloped downward, the sound of laughter echoing in my skull. Then the passage opened into a small stone chamber lit by a single hanging bulb that swayed gently, as though someone had just passed. Rust-colored stains covered the floor. I rose to my feet, shaking. There were shackles bolted to the wall, their chains dangling. Footsteps sounded behind me in the tunnel, slow, heavy, deliberate. I grabbed the nearest chain and yanked it free with a loud snap. The footsteps stopped. I turned toward the tunnel, holding the chain like a weapon. A silhouette appeared in the opening, tall, skeleton, its head brushing the ceiling. It didn't move. "Stay back," I shouted. My own voice bounced back at me, sounding small and scared. The figure ducked its head and stepped into the room. I swung the chain, striking the wall with a shower of sparks. The figure only tilted its head as if amused. Then the light bulb went out. Darkness swallowed the room. I swung blindly, the chain whizzing through the air. Something brushed past my shoulder. I At the end of the row was a ladder leading up. I climbed, my hands slipping on the cold rungs. The noise below grew deafening screams, chains, pounding fists. I burst through a rusted grate and found myself back in the